Hello everybody and welcome to Paula once again. Now today I'm filming on a Sunday, which is something quite different to see, to be honest with you. I usually film on a Saturday or a weekday. Anyway, over the next 2 days I'm going to be sampling these South Somerset bus changes. You've seen me down the north and now you're going to see me do the south. In North Somerset it was mainly first bus. However, in South Somerset, a whole bunch of different operators have improved and not improved their local bus services. Most importantly, First Bus have actually reduced the frequency in preparation of electric buses entering service on their network on a number of different routes, both in Taunton and in rural Somerset. For a start, my local bus service, the 21, the frequency has stayed the same on Sundays, which is hourly, which is good, but on a Monday to Saturday it is now every 35 minutes, and on a Saturday it's technically every 36 to 45 minutes. However, this can vary on whether or not a bus is early, late, cancelled or whatever. Anyway, there goes that Enviro 400, which should have left the buses of Somerset Fleet by now, leaving Bridgewater bus station on its way to Taunton. Now, First Bus have reduced the frequency on a lot of bus services. However, a number of services, mainly local town services, have had a new Sunday service introduced. One of these is the new Bridgewater town bus, the B1. Why did I say new? It's not a new bus service. Anyway, I'm going to be taking this round to St John Street on a massive loop which goes via Sydenham, Kingsdown and Bridgewater Community Hospital, just to name a few places. On this journey, I got an Enviro 200 Dart. Turning around at the King's Drive roundabout on the B1 service. Now, I know I was filming this on Easter Sunday, and this was the first day of the B1 Sunday service. However, I was expecting at least one or two other passengers to use the new Sunday service. However, then again, it was Easter Sunday, and it was only around 11 o'clock, so you never know. People might have had a line and not gotten up until 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon. If you're that person, seriously, you should get up a bit sooner, maybe midday. Anyway, like I said a minute ago, I was the only person to use the entirety of this section of the B1. However, some other passengers may have gotten on a little bit later down on the route in the Hamp area. Anyway, here we are now at Bridgewater Community Hospital, where I wasn't surprised to see anybody get on or off. Even on a weekday, passengers rarely use the bus stop here. am arriving at the main stop on St John Street. There are two stops on St John Street, one outside the Bristol and Exeter Inn, known as St John Street, and the other stop which is near the Bunch of Grapes pub, and the stop is therefore called the Bunch of Grapes. Now here I was going to do something that you wouldn't expect me to do, especially on Easter Sunday. I was going to take a train all the way to Bristol. It will all become clear in a minute. Anyway, there goes that Enviro 200 Dart, leaving from the online St John Street stop. That is not actually where the St John Street stop is, however, it says that online, so I guess that's where First Bus have trained all the drivers where the St John Street stop is. Here I am now all the way up in Bristol, several miles, nearly 40-50 miles away from Bridgewater. I think it's around 45 miles away. And here I am on a 376 bus, heading all the way back to Yeovil. What the hell am I doing? Well, on a Sunday, getting the train to Bristol and getting the 376 down to Yeovil is the easiest and possibly only way to get from Bridgewater to Yeovil by public transport. And since around 2 weeks ago when I was filming this video, probably nearly 3 weeks ago now once this video comes out, the 376 got its Sunday service, which went between Bristol and Street, extended. It now goes to Somerset and Yeovil. So yes, I know I'm a nutter, but maybe this was a bit too nuts for me. I think this is worse than going from Bridgewater to London by local bus. This was ages. I took the 376 all the way from Bristol to Yeovil. I have done this once or twice before, and it honestly takes forever. It's not even like you can get out and stretch your legs. You're sat in the same seat for 3 hours, nearly 4 hours to be honest with you. Here I am arriving at Wells bus station, which is the main intermediate stop on the 376 route apart from Street, and here is one of the major bus stations in Somerset. As you can probably see, Wells bus depot had actually run out of space, so a lot of their buses had actually been stored at the bus station. For some reason there was a street deck here though, not too sure why. Passing through the marketplace in Somerton town centre, with Somerton being the first major stop on the new 376 Sunday service extension. Here I am arriving at Yeovil bus station, which has not had a Sunday service for a very long time. However, it now has 2 Sunday services, both operated by First Bus. Here I am now at the recently reopened stand 12 at Yeovil bus station. This has been shut for quite a long time now to allow works to go on behind the scenes here at the derelict Glover's Walk shopping centre, which will eventually be demolished and will make way for a new green space outside the bus station, and it will also allow for new bus station facilities such as toilets and a waiting room. Anyway, the 376 was one of the new First Bus Sunday services in Yeovil, and here I am on the other, which is of course the Yeovil Town 51 service. Now I have heard that on weekdays this now gets extremely busy and overcrowded with the withdrawal of the South West Coaches 11 service, which also served Abbey Manor. However, on Easter Sunday there were only me and maybe 1 or 2 other passengers on board. It was still better than the B1 though, and I have heard that the 51 Sunday service actually gets quite well used. Anyway, I'm going to be taking this to Abbey Manor Park at the Forum. Putney Asda, which is one of the main timing points along this part of the 51 route. After waiting for a short amount of time, we head off towards Abbey Manor, and unsurprisingly, nobody gets on at Asda and nobody gets off at Asda. However, I do believe it is quite a well-used stop on the weekday 51 service. I just have to say, this was the comfiest right streetlight I've ever been on. I don't know what seats it had, but there were certainly ones I didn't recognise. Anyway, as we leave Preston Plucknett Asda, we also passed a relatively new Houndstone retail park. Here I am arriving at Abbey Manor Park, the Forum, where I'd alight the 51 service and head back home via a car. I try to use the bus whenever I can, but I was not prepared to go all the way back up to Bristol and get all the way back. It was virtually impossible. I would make it as far as Bridgewater and then be stranded. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this part of the video, and I will see you in 2 days' time on Tuesday the 22nd of April for the start of the new Buses of Somerset and other operators' weekday timetables. Bye everyone, see you in around 2 seconds. Well, I think that was a bit longer than 2 seconds, but hello everybody and welcome aboard a train arriving at Taunton station. Now, I would have done the intro to the video in Taunton town centre or at the railway station itself. However, my train from Bridgewater ended up arriving in 30 minutes late due to problems in the Reading area. I think they had signalling problems in the previous couple of days. Anyway, I did the intro on the train because, like I said, I had a relatively tight connection and it wasn't ideal that my train was 30 minutes late. Anyway, you would expect me to get a bus into Taunton, but no, I'm taking a bus out into the wildest area of Somerset, Exmoor. Nah, not really, it's not the wildest part of Somerset. However, I'm going to be taking it to Yeovil, which is on the outskirts of Exmoor, on the recently curtailed 25 bus route. Although you can't see it, you can probably hear it. Here is my Buses of Somerset 25 service arriving at Taunton station. Here's the proof. I'm now leaving on the 25 service. Sorry about the blue screen, but unfortunately there was a fault with my camera at that exact moment. Anyway, like I said a minute ago, I'm going to be taking it right out into the countryside at Yeovil. But first, here we are passing through the Hudson Way and Bindon Road area of Taunton, which used to be served by the number 3 service run by Somerset Council. Not anymore, that now serves Chestnut Drive, and we'll be taking a ride on that local bus service a bit later on in the video. The 25 service used to run between Taunton, Yeovil, Bampton and Dulverton, with 2 services a day terminating at Langley Corner on the outskirts of Yeovil. The bus service ran a couple of times a day, and here's the Paxton President. It used to run a couple of times a day, and previous to that it used to run every 2 hours, but that's a story for another day. However, the bus service has actually been cut back as far as Yeovil, with Somerset Council now running a new 26 service between Yeovil, Bampton and Dulverton using a minibus. It's not ideal, but it does connect with most 25 services, and there is one direct 25 service in the morning and in the evening to Taunton and from Taunton heading back towards Dulverton, designed for commuters. However, the 25 does have a new counterpart, the 25A. These are a few extra bus services that operate between Taunton and Cotford St Luke and are practically useless since nobody uses the bus in Cotford St Luke. Anyway, here we are in Wiveliscombe on the standard 25 part of the route, but I would not be changing onto the 26, but the new Somerset Council 27 service known as the Wivey to Wellington. In Wiveliscombe. Whilst the curtailment of the 25 to Wiveliscombe was a bad thing for most people, Langley Corner has actually gotten quite a decent bus service out of it. However, I'm still sure people would much prefer a direct Taunton to Dulverton service. Anyway, they are now able to run fewer buses but more journeys on the 25, so as a result, here is the Enviro 400 going back through Wiveliscombe quite a bit earlier than what it would do if it was coming back from Dulverton. Here is a Somerset Council Iveco Daily minibus arriving at Wiveliscombe Square in Wiveliscombe Town Centre on the first 27 service from Wellington. I'd be taking the 27 back to Wellington, and then the service would continue on to West Buckland, which hasn't had a bus service for 8 years. Although I was travelling on the 27 service, they ended up swapping vehicles in Wiveliscombe, and the Iveco Daily ended up going on the new 26 service to Dulverton, whilst I ended up getting a much better Fiat Ducato minibus on the 27 service. Anyway, here we are leaving Wiveliscombe, going back towards Milverton, Langford, Budville and Wellington. Here I am now, turning off the main road in Milverton to head on to the country lanes. This part of Somerset hasn't had a bus service in a very long time, so this service was actually extremely busy.
Anything I found in the charity shop, strips out and you can tear them rather than cut
Here I am passing through the small village of Langford, Budville, which is about halfway on the route between Wiveliscombe, Milverton and Wellington. Quite a few people actually got on here, so at this point the minibus was completely full. We were quite lucky that nobody boarded the bus in Tonedale.
Ain't got no friend, mate.
That's crafty because it
Even though you talk to people that you look at you, in your team, how they perform.
That's right, they do. Yes, they do. Yes.
Yeah.
One lives in Puritan, one that's got the big black lab.
There was when I went there was a lot of like kids running about, and feral kids and all that. They've all grown up and gone. And there was a little bit of trouble. But, I mean, I don't know what takes on your end of the place. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know many people living there now.
Sometimes you get a bit hardly ever.
They call them dumb animals, but they're anything but. Sometimes you talk to them. You sometimes have memories it's fate. They know what you're saying.
Here I am arriving at the post office bus stop, which is the main stop on Wellington High Street. There goes an Enviro 400 on the 22A service up to Tonedale and back. There goes that Fiat Ducato minibus on the 27 service towards Chelston and West Buckland, which hasn't had a bus service for 8 years. I cannot stress that enough. How can you have a bus service and then lose it for 8 years and then suddenly gain it again? I just don't get how some of these things work. Right on cue, as that minibus was leaving, one of the new electric buses actually arrived in Wellington. Unfortunately, it was on testing. However, it was one of the new single-decker Yutong E10 vehicles. I absolutely despise the Yutong U11DDs. However, the single-decker Yutong E10s are actually quite nice and stylish, and the new ultraviolet livery actually looks pretty decent on the buses. There goes one of the older Enviro 400s in the first bus Somerset fleet, leaving Wellington High Street on its way on the X22 route to Rockwell Green, Uffcombe, Willand and eventually Tiverton, which takes around about an hour from Wellington, maybe 45 minutes. The 22 series of routes have actually had a number of improvements, including a new bus stop at Orchard Grove Park and Bus, which isn't actually getting used at the moment for some reason, and the frequency on the 22A, X22 corridor in Wellington and Taunton has actually been increased from every 20 minutes to every 15 minutes. Unfortunately though, this does allow for bus bunching, which means that 2 buses come at once, which isn't really the thing you want. You've waited 30 minutes instead of every 15 minutes, and then 2 buses come at once. Oh well. I actually got chatting to a few people on this bus, but didn't actually manage to film very much of it. All I can say is, for some reason we didn't stop at the new Orchard Grove Park and Bus. Here goes that ex-Bristol Enviro 400 on the 25A service to Cotford St Luke. Do you notice anything weird or strange with the destination board? Comment down below. Anyway, in Taunton I had a little bit of time before my bus, so I did some bus spotting, and after that headed to the parade in the town centre to get on the new Route 3. I say the new Route 3, it's not a new route, they've just extended it from Taunton town centre out to Chestnut Drive, which has had a poor bus service for quite a long time, ever since the Route 6 was rerouted on a more simpler route, which is good for the rest of the people but not very good for the passengers of Chestnut Drive. Here comes the Somerset Council minibus on the Route 3. Again, the Route 3 is another council-operated service. This time I had one of the really nice Mercedes-Benz Sprinter EVM City Line minibuses. I went on one or two of these in Cornwall, and the Somerset Council ones are exactly the same. They are really nice and comfortable. They just don't have destination boards. I'll be taking this from Taunton Parade back to Taunton Parade via Chestnut Drive. After the buses of Somerset, or first bus, Route 6, which goes around Holway, was simplified so it didn't serve Chestnut Drive anymore, the only option was to take the 99, now operated by Hatch Green Coaches, but previously operated by first buses of Somerset, which has always had a very infrequent service, and the route has actually been simplified quite a bit in recent years. Sometimes it would go straight down Shoreditch Road, I think that's what it's called, and sometimes it would go via Chestnut Drive. At the moment, the Hatch Green Coaches 99 goes straight down Shoreditch Road, whereas the number 3 does serve Chestnut Drive on an hourly basis.
What it's all about yet.
Yeah. Did I give you a timetable?
Well, we had one sent to us.
Oh, you've got them. Yeah, okay. I've got some here if you want.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Well, actually, you could give me one just in case because I've got a different one to let my friend.
Right.
Here we are turning onto Chestnut Drive, which, like I said earlier on in the video, has had a very poor bus service from the start, ever since Route 6 was simplified. We waited here for a few minutes, around 3 or 4 minutes, before heading back into Taunton via Shoreditch Road.
Yeah, and then we moved out, or I moved out to near Langport.
Yeah,
But my sister's in just outside Ilminster.
that's lovely. You can get off earlier, Betty, if you want to.
Yes, I might do that.
Yeah, well, you better tell the driver.
Can you stop at the,
Outside Wellington's
yeah,
Okay.
parking
not
opportunity.
this bus stop, the next one.
Next one, isn't it? Yeah.
That's right, there you go.
arriving back at Taunton Parade, where you can change onto all local bus services as well as a few interurban bus services which do not serve Castle Way. Once the Taunton Transport Hub reopens, otherwise known as the old Taunton bus station located on Tower Street, I would imagine that most of the bus services that serve the parade, apart from the independent services, will serve the new transport hub. I'm not too sure how it will work. Only first bus services used to serve the old Taunton bus station, but since this is going to be a transport hub, it may be that most services end up serving the new bus station. Anyway, there goes that Mercedes-Benz Sprinter EVM Cityline minibus I believe out of service. I think that service was supposed to terminate at the parade. Anyway, my next leg of the journey was to take the modified 54 service all the way across to Yeovil on the absolutely mammoth journey. Here is another ex-Bristol and Borough 400 arriving at Taunton Parade on the 54 service, which is a crucial link between Yeovil, Somerset and Taunton. Now I was expecting to have this particular vehicle, however they ended up swapping the vehicles and this bus ended up going back to the classic old bus depot on Hamilton Road. Instead, I had this piece of rubbish, another Wright street light. I'm getting a bit fed up with these, and some of the Wright street lights will be staying once the electric buses enter service, so to be honest with you, I think I'd rather have a U-Tong than a Wright street light. That's how bad street lights are. I'm not too sure about a street deck though. Anyway, after a van driver blocked the road for around 5 minutes, we were soon on the move, heading towards Yeovil, around about 3 or 4 minutes late. Somerset's smallest town. Here they are also proposing a new transport hub. It will be quite difficult creating a transport hub here since not very many bus services serve the town and there is no current bus station. All of the buses just stop outside Langport Town Hall, whereas in Taunton, Bridgewater and Yeovil and in a few other places where they want to create transport hubs, there is already some sort of existing bus station, whether or not it's abandoned or still being used by local bus services. Arriving into Somerset, which is the halfway point along the route, even though I'm fairly certain it's more than halfway between Taunton and Yeovil. This is called the White Hart, and this is the main stop in Somerset along with Behind Bury, and is located very close to Somerset Marketplace, which is extremely popular, especially on Sundays.
After 2 years
54 usually turn off and head towards the Fleet Air Arm Museum and RNAS Yeovilton. Due to low demand and low passenger usage, the 54 no longer serves Yeovilton and runs straight from the top of Ilchester to the bottom of Ilchester, basically from the new bit of the village to the old bit of the village near where the statue is. I think this is actually quite a smart move. Although the 54 bus times have changed and the times are appalling if you're trying to connect onto the 54 from any other bus service, especially in Taunton, I think it's quite a smart move that they don't serve Yeovilton anymore, since hardly anybody ever used that section of the route. I don't think I ever saw a single person get on or off at the Fleet Air Arm Museum. Anyway, here we are on the outskirts of Yeovil, where the 54 still makes a massive detour around Wessex Road. Here I am arriving at the borough, which is located right in the heart of Yeovil, where all of the nice shops and restaurants are. A lot of people say that Yeovil is dead. However, a lot of the shops around the borough are still going, and the area around the borough is absolutely thriving, full of happy people going to Yeovil to do their shopping or going to just have a nice day out, I suppose. Yeovil is actually quite a nice place, as long as you don't go to the bus station. Only a few passengers remained when we got to the bus station, which by the way half of it is being demolished to make way for a new park area. By half of it, I mean the Glover's Walk shopping centre, because that is technically part of the bus station. Anyway, I was quite surprised when I found out that one of the other passengers on the 54 bus transferred onto my next bus, which was the controversial South West Coaches Route 53. Here I am at Yeovil bus station, stand 11, on time, on this absolutely amazing ex-Western Greyhound Opta Solo SR. I believe it used to operate with defunct operator Western Greyhound in Cornwall, but I'm not too sure. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments below. I'm always happy to hear your suggestions. Now the Route 53 as well as the new Route 50, which is another new Yeovil town service, both of these routes only require one bus, are both very controversial. Hardly anybody has used them since they've started up. However, they are serving areas of Yeovil which haven't had a bus service in ages, like years and years and years. A bit like how West Buckland near Wellington didn't have a bus service for 8 years. I think it's a bit like that, where the areas of Yeovil that the 50 and 53 are serving haven't had bus services for ages. However, as a result of these two new bus services, South West Coaches had to withdraw the Route 11, which was an extremely popular route, and is now causing the 51, which also serves Abbey Manor, to become very overcrowded and causing the 51 to actually break down because the buses are not used to working so much, because the 51 didn't used to be very popular, but then again that was because it wasn't very reliable. Buses just broke down anyway. What I think they should have done is continue to operate the 50 and 53 because they only require one bus, but then run the 11 service hourly instead of every 30 minutes. That way you would only require one bus on the 11 instead of two buses on the 11. However, I think it has something to do with council funding, since the 51 is also funded by the council now, whereas the 11 always has been. The 51 was also added to the council funding list of routes. Anyway, that's enough of me waffling on about controversial bus routes. Let's enjoy this beastly Opta Solo SR around the Links trading estate. at Yeovil Council offices on Brimton Way. I was quite surprised that the bus service served Yeovil Council offices, since most members of the council seem to drive and not take the bus. However, somebody did get off at the council offices, so well done to whoever person that is, they actually used the bus. I think it's quite good that the bus serves Yeovil Council offices, since it is quite a frequent service. There is usually quite a large gap of around an hour and a half, and then 2 services in the space of 30 minutes, which is weird, but it does mean that the service is kind of frequent. Now, I'm not too sure what the name of this estate is that we're turning into, however it is also served by the Somerset Council Route 56, which I believe comes in from West Coker, but it may come in from another small village in the local area. Arriving back at Yeovil bus station. As I arrive back in at Yeovil bus station on this amazing Optare Solo SR, I'd just like to say thank you very much for watching the video and for supporting the channel. I've gained a lot of subscribers in recent times and I truly, honestly appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. So thank you very much for watching this video. And it has to be said, as much as I like that Optare Solo SR, it is starting to sound and look a little bit knackered. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye everyone!